Morning Shot.
Good morning. Thanks for joining me. I'm Ryan Huang on The Breakfast Show. Well, after the grim discovery of debris from the Titan submersible on the ocean floor, five main pieces of the sub's hull and exterior, including the nose so far, the focus of rescue efforts have turned towards trying to understand what caused the accident. And over the past week, we've seen countless international media reports on the vessel that had gone missing during a dive to the Titanic wreck. But even with a variety of deep sea experts weighing in on the incident, many are calling for a full investigation as questions still remain on what actually happened, risks that could have been mitigated, and regulations surrounding such deep sea expeditions. For a deeper look into those issues, we are privileged to have with us David Marquet, retired US Navy captain and former submarine commander. He's also the best-selling author of two books, Turn the Ship Around and Leadership is Language. Thanks for joining us on the show, David.
Thanks, Ryan, and good morning, everyone.
Hey, of course, different time zone for you. So thank you again for joining us and sparing some time to dive into this issue. So let's dive into it. All five men on board apparently were instantly killed in what authorities have called it a catastrophic implosion. So help us understand what that means, what actually happens when such an explosion underwater occurs.
Yeah, so I think that's the most likely scenario. First of all, the submarine lost contact an hour and 45 minutes after they left the surface. And the debris field at the bottom for the submarine was not very big. So this indicates that the submarine was a lot closer to the bottom than they were to the top. Now, as you probably know, the main hull of the submarine was made of carbon fiber. The ends were made of titanium, and then they had a viewing window. Those are the main pieces of the submarine. When you load your bookshelf with books and you start to overload it, the bookshelf bends. This bending, in essence, is a warning. And we call materials that bend like that ductile. And they warn us before they fail. Metal is a ductile material. Carbon fiber, however, is not a ductile material. It is what we call a brittle material. So if you have a carbon fiber tennis racket or, say, a hiking pole, it's not going to really bend. You can put a lot of pressure on it and it's stiff, and then it breaks. So carbon fiber gives no warning when it's about to rupture. So that's why I think that this would have been a very sudden collapse. Now, there are a number of reasons why the carbon fiber could have failed, but when it did, and we're not sure that it was the carbon fiber, but that's what a lot of people are looking at. So, but when carbon fiber fails, it's essentially instantaneous and without warning.
Yeah, as you pointed out, it comes down to the material being used as well. What could have caused it? And some reports have pointed out that there was a leak at some point in the journey. Would that have contributed to an implosion?
A leak. Yeah, this is news to me, but a leak would contribute because there's two ways a leak would cause the problem. Number one is if you're leaking, you're bringing on water and the water is making you heavier and that's making you go deeper, maybe before you're ready to go deeper. The second thing that happens is a tire on your car is about 2 times atmospheric pressure. So you can imagine getting a leak in your tire and the air spilling out. A fire hose is about 8 or 10. They're down there at 300 or 400 times atmospheric pressure. So even a very small leak, as the water rushes in, the water rushing in actually makes that little crack get bigger and bigger and bigger, which makes more and more and more water rushing in. So that would then be that would be a different failure technique, but eventually it would cause a crack and the water would come in so hard and so fast that it would blow the backside of the vessel apart.
All right. David, let's talk about the design issues that you alluded to. Some concerns have been raised over the Titan's experimental design and the carbon fiber material used to build it. So there is this debate now because of what is being described as innovative design using carbon material or carbon fiber material was one of the ways, I guess, to make the vessel happen. So Ocean Gate's CEO Stockton Rush said that he was tired of industry players who have been trying to use a safety argument to stop innovation. So he's saying, no, carbon fiber is the way to go for future vessel design. What do you make of this? No, not forgetting that this was also an unclassed vessel, bringing actual paying passengers into the deep seas. They also had to sign a lot of waivers to just get around all these, I guess, requirements.
Yeah, I mean, we use carbon fiber for a lot of things, as you probably know: tennis rackets, cars. Boeing Dreamliner 787 has that kind of material in it. So carbon fiber perhaps could be safe, but we really don't have that much experience with it. It's a new material, so it might be safe to go down once and become pressurized. But remember, we're also freezing at very cold temperatures, and those things make things that are brittle even more brittle. So the repeated cycles, pressurization, relaxation, relaxation, over time degrades the material. That's why you can't fly an airplane forever. And we take the airplane apart and do a bunch of inspections. But even after about 30 years, for our submarines, we use 33 years. But even after about 30 years or so, the airplane's permanently decommissioned, because at that point, we just don't know that it's safe. Therefore, it's better to assume that it's not.
That's a great point. Even safety helmets and many other safety gear, they degrade to some point, and we have to replace them eventually. We are in conversation with David Marquet. He is a retired U.S. Navy captain and former submarine commander. Now, David, you've had lots of experience, years of experience back in your time in the U.S. Navy. And based on what we are understanding around the design, the way to lock this submarine was from the outside. So that includes 17 bolts from the outside, so there is no door or way to open it from inside. Is that, in some sense, a flawed design that you won't be able to escape from inside if anything happens?
Well, you can't open the door. You cannot open the door from the inside when you're deep underwater. Anyway, I do think there's a weakness to the design, because in this case, if they had been able to get back to the surface, it was possible, I think a slim possibility, but it was possible the ship had returned to the surface and just couldn't be found. And in that case, that would have been a true tragedy, because they just would have been waiting for rescue, and rescue would have never come.
All right, talking about rescue, authorities, including the U.S. Coast Guard and the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, have announced the launch of investigations. Though it's unclear whether the agencies are conducting separate ones or working together, but a worthy point to highlight is that there's no black box, so we're not going to be able to track, in that sense, the last movements of the vessel itself. So what areas will the investigators be focusing on to figure out what actually happened?
Yeah, well, the rules that regulate, say, for example, a black box, are in a treaty called Safety of Life at Sea, or we refer to it as SOLAS. And that treaty defines a passenger vessel as a vessel that's designed to carry 12 or more passengers. So this ship was not covered by that treaty. So they may have broken some rules, but they didn't break any rules in this particular treaty. The investigators are going to first and foremost try and determine the cause of the failure of the ship. And they'll do this, one, by trying to collect as many pieces of it and doing analysis of the pieces from the bottom of the sea. And number two, they'll go back and look at the original blueprints and the way it was manufactured, and they may be able to, and they can test those materials in a ways that were not tested. For example, they could subject a model to pressure and then bring it to the surface, and they could do that 10 times and then cut it in half and see if there's cracks or little internal flaws that would not have been detected by the company and the people before they set out on this journey.
Now, David, the other question that comes to mind is whether this entire area, when it comes to deep sea expeditions, do we need to look at regulations more closely? For example, the type of licensing required for those who organize it or even participants. When you think about it, this not only has potential to endanger whoever takes part in it, but also rescuers or anyone who's in the area. Should we be looking at something in this form?
Yeah, well, the same treaty, the SOLAS Treaty, Safety of Life at Sea, does talk about those kind of things. It's primarily concerned about big cruise ships and merchant ships and oil tankers, and making sure that they can safely move around the planet and that they're not discharging pollutants
Hmm.
into the water. And again, a passenger vessel starts when you have 12 people. So you're thinking about ferries and those kind of things. I took the ferry from Singapore across to Indonesia, and that would have had life preservers specified by the treaty. So there's going to be a debate about what's going to happen. It's a relatively new industry. I mean, it's only been 40 years since people have been going that deep, and it was just a tiny handful of researchers. More people have gone into space than have gone down to this depth in the ocean, even though it feels so close to us. The oceans are really unknown and to a high degree and unexplored.
Yeah, some people describe the deep sea as a different planet altogether. Well, with me, Chairman David Marquet. He is the retired U.S. Navy captain and former submarine commander, helping us to dive into the latest on the Titan submersible. David, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Money FM 89.3.